And one of North Carolina's top Republicans is pushing a bill that would impose harsher punishments on protesters, specifically protesters who damage property or hurt other people. He says the bill is needed because some of Raleigh's protests have turned violent. Paul Spade checks that claim for PolitiFact.
It's been almost 3 years since a Minneapolis police officer killed George Floyd, prompting protests all across the country. Now, how violent did those protests get here in Raleigh? Well, to hear House Speaker Tim Moore tell it, they turned deadly. Listen to what he says on the Tying It Together podcast with Tim Boyum.
I'm a staunch supporter of the First Amendment. What we do have to rein in, though, is when it becomes violent and when it becomes destructive. We saw the riots that happened just blocks from this building a few years ago where people were injured. I think someone was actually shot and killed.
Was someone actually shot and killed during Raleigh's protests? Moore's comments caught our attention because, well, we covered those protests over several days, as you can see here, and we didn't hear of any deaths, at least not in Raleigh. And it turns out that's because there were none. The Raleigh Police Department put out this report on what happened during those protests, and it mentions violence and property damage and injuries to police officers and all that. But our PD told us they found no deaths associated with those 2020 protests in Raleigh. When we asked Moore's office about this, they said he was speaking broadly about all the protest deaths that occurred nationwide. Well, that's not what he said in the podcast or in committee meetings where he talked about his bill. And that's why the Truth and Media rates his claim false. Read our full fact check at WRAL.com.